Stand on the ancient walls of York today, and you're standing where Roman soldiers kept watch nearly 2,000 years ago. Walk through its winding streets, and you're following paths once traveled by Viking merchants, medieval pilgrims, kings, warriors, and ordinary people whose lives shaped history. This is not just another old city. Emperors died here. A future ruler of the Roman Empire began his journey to power here. Vikings conquered it, Norman armies devastated it, plague swept through its streets, and bombs fell from the sky during World War II. Yet somehow, York survived every challenge that threatened to erase it from history. For over 2 millennia, this city has stood at the crossroads of empire, faith, war, trade, and innovation. Its story is not just the story of one city. It is the story of Britain itself. Over the next few minutes, we'll journey through 2,000 years of triumph, tragedy, conquest, and survival. This is the complete history of York, and it begins with Roman soldiers arriving on a distant frontier in 71 AD. It's 71 AD. Northern Britain is a dangerous frontier where tribes resist Roman rule and survival is never guaranteed. When the Roman Ninth Legion reaches the meeting point of the rivers Ouse and Foss, they recognize its strategic value immediately. Here they construct a military fortress known as Eboracum. Timber walls rise first, followed by stronger stone defenses. Barracks, bathhouses, temples, and administrative buildings soon follow. What begins as a military outpost quickly becomes the foundation of a city. But one of York's earliest mysteries emerges just decades later. The powerful Ninth Legion, nearly 5,000 soldiers strong, disappears from history. No clear records explain what happened to them. Historians still debate their fate today. The Sixth Legion replaces them and remains in York for centuries. During this period, Eboracum grows into one of the most important cities in Roman Britain. Then, history takes a remarkable turn. In 306 AD, Emperor Constantius dies in York. His soldiers immediately proclaim his son, Constantine, as the new emperor. That young ruler would go on to transform the Roman world forever, legalizing Christianity and reshaping Western civilization. Remarkably, his journey to power begins here in York. As Christianity spreads throughout Britain, York becomes more than a military center. It becomes a center of faith. By the early 4th century, bishops from York are attending major church councils across Europe. When Roman authority finally collapses in Britain, many cities fade into obscurity. York does not. The Anglo-Saxons inherit the city, adapt it to a new age, and keep its story alive. And before we continue into the next chapter of York's incredible journey, let us know in the comments, which ancient civilization fascinates you the most? Rome, the Vikings, or the Anglo-Saxons? If you're enjoying this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more stories from the ancient and medieval world. Because York's most dramatic transformations are still ahead. By the middle of the 9th century, York has already survived the fall of Rome and the rise of Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. But a new threat is approaching from across the North Sea. In November 866, Viking longships move silently up the river Ouse before dawn. Hundreds of Danish and Norwegian warriors surround the city before its defenders can react. By the end of the day, York has fallen. The Vikings rename it Jorvik. But unlike earlier raiders, they do not come simply to plunder and leave. They come to stay. Families settle here. Craftsmen establish workshops. Merchants create trade routes stretching from Scandinavia to Ireland and beyond. Soon, Jorvik becomes one of the most important cities in the Viking world. Its streets are filled with blacksmiths, jewelers, woodworkers, and traders. Coins bearing the names of Viking kings circulate through busy markets. For nearly a century, York thrives as a powerful Norse city. But Viking rule is rarely stable. Rival kings battle for power, and alliances shift constantly. The last Viking ruler of York is a man whose nickname says everything about his reputation: Eric Bloodaxe. In 954, he is killed in battle, and the Viking kingdom of York comes to an end. For a brief moment, York is English once again. Then comes the year that changes England forever. First, Norwegian forces attempt to reclaim York. King Harold Godwinson rushes north and defeats them at Stamford Bridge in a stunning victory. But while Harold celebrates, another invasion is already underway. William of Normandy has landed on England's southern coast. Harold is forced to march hundreds of miles south. Exhausted and outnumbered, he faces William at Hastings. Harold falls. William wins. England changes forever. When William arrives in York, he orders a castle built to secure Norman control. But the people of York refuse to submit quietly. They rebel, destroy the Norman garrison, and briefly reclaim their freedom. William's response is devastating. The infamous harrying of the North leaves villages burned, farmland destroyed, and entire communities facing starvation. York survives once again, but the city emerging from this catastrophe will never be the same. Ahead lies York's greatest age of wealth, influence, and medieval glory. The Norman conquest leaves scars across northern England, but York refuses to remain in ruins. Slowly, the city rebuilds. Trade returns, markets grow busier, craftsmen reopen their workshops, pilgrims begin arriving from across the kingdom. By the 12th century, York is once again becoming one of England's most important cities. Its growing influence is strengthened by religion. In 1153, Archbishop William of York returns from exile to a hero's welcome. Thousands gather to celebrate his arrival. According to tradition, the crowd is so large that Ouse Bridge collapses beneath their weight. Miraculously, no one is killed. After his death, William is honored as a saint, and pilgrims travel from across England to visit his shrine. York's reputation as a spiritual center continues to grow. But beneath the prosperity lies a darker reality. In 1190, one of the most tragic events in York's history unfolds. Rising religious tensions and anti-Jewish hatred sweep through England. York's Jewish community seeks refuge inside Clifford's Tower, hoping the castle walls will protect them. Instead, they find themselves trapped. A hostile mob surrounds the fortress and demands conversion or death. Facing impossible choices, many choose to take their own lives rather than surrender. Those who emerge, hoping for mercy, are killed. Around 150 people perish. The tragedy remains one of the darkest chapters in the city's long history. Yet York continues to expand. In 1212, King John grants the city significant powers of self-government. York can now administer its own affairs, collect taxes, and manage local justice. This independence strengthens its economy and political influence. The engine of that prosperity is wool. English wool is among the most valuable commodities in Europe, and York becomes a major center for its trade and export. Wealth flows into the city. Merchant families build fortunes. New buildings rise above the crowded streets. By the end of the 13th century, York has become so important that King Edward I temporarily moves the machinery of government here. The treasury, courts, and administrators of England all operate from York, while Edward campaigns against Scotland. For several years, York effectively serves as the capital of England. The city has never been richer. Then disaster strikes. In 1349, the Black Death arrives. No one understands what causes the disease. No one knows how to stop it. The plague spreads through crowded homes, workshops, and marketplaces with terrifying speed. Families lose parents, children, and neighbors within days. Businesses close, trade collapses. Streets that once echoed with commerce fall silent. Within months, somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of York's population is gone. The city survives, but recovery takes decades. And just as York begins to heal, another storm gathers over England. A bitter civil war erupts between two rival royal families. One bears a red rose, the other a white rose. The conflict will become known as the Wars of the Roses, and York is about to find itself at the very center of the struggle. While armies clash for the English crown, another masterpiece slowly rises above the city skyline. York Minster, a cathedral that will take more than 250 years to complete and become one of the greatest Gothic buildings in Europe. But before its final stones are laid, York must first endure one of the bloodiest political conflicts in English history. By the late 15th century, York stands at the center of one of England's most bitter conflicts. The Wars of the Roses have divided the kingdom for decades. Rival branches of the royal family battle for control of the English throne. The House of Lancaster fights under the Red Rose. The House of York marches beneath the White Rose. For the people of York, this is more than a distant political struggle. Their city's very identity is tied to the House of York. Yorkist armies gather in these streets. Yorkist kings reward the city with privileges and protection. Among them, none is remembered more strongly than Richard III. To many in southern England, Richard remains controversial, but in York, he is viewed differently. He supports the city, strengthens its position, and earns the loyalty of its people. Then comes August 1485. At the Battle of Bosworth Field, Richard III falls in combat. The House of York loses the crown, and the Tudor dynasty rises to power under Henry VII. For York, it feels like the end of an era. Yet while kingdoms rise and fall, one extraordinary project finally reaches completion. In 1472, after more than 2.5 centuries of construction, York Minster is completed. Towering above the city, its stained glass windows and soaring Gothic architecture make it one of the greatest cathedrals in Europe. But peace does not last. The 16th century brings a conflict even more personal than civil war. It brings religious revolution. King Henry VIII breaks with Rome and establishes his own authority over the English Church. Across northern England, many see this as an attack on their faith and traditions. In 1536, tens of thousands joined the Pilgrimage of Grace, one of the largest popular uprisings in English history. York becomes one of its most important centers. Families, clergy, and ordinary citizens march in protest. They hope to preserve the religious institutions that have shaped their lives for generations. Henry responds with force. The rebellion is crushed. Its leaders are executed. Monasteries across York are dissolved, their treasures confiscated, and their buildings abandoned. Yet some refuse to abandon their beliefs. One of the most remarkable is Margaret Clitheroe, a butcher's wife living in the shambles. She secretly shelters Catholic priests despite the dangers. When arrested, she refuses to cooperate with authorities, protecting her family and those she has helped. Her courage ensures that she will be remembered for centuries. Then, in 1644, York once again finds itself trapped by war. England descends into civil conflict between King Charles I and Parliament. York supports the king and soon becomes the target of a massive siege. For 11 weeks, thousands of soldiers surround the city. Food becomes scarce, disease spreads, hope fades. When royalist forces attempt to lift the siege at the Battle of Marston Moor, they suffer a devastating defeat. York is forced to surrender. The city has endured dynastic wars, religious upheaval, and civil conflict. But which period of York's history do you find most fascinating so far? The Vikings, the Wars of the Roses, or the Tudor Reformation? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this journey through 2,000 years of history, be sure to subscribe and join our community for more stories from the ancient and medieval world. Because York's transformation into the modern age is about to begin. After centuries of warfare, political struggles, and religious conflict, York finally enters a new era. The battles that once determined the fate of kings begin to fade into memory. A different kind of transformation is now underway. In 1829, however, York receives a reminder that history is never completely safe. One evening, a man named Jonathan Martin hides inside York Minster after services have ended. Convinced that he is carrying out God's will, he sets fire to the cathedral. Flames race through the ancient structure. The magnificent choir roof collapses. Centuries of craftsmanship are destroyed in a single night. Yet York does what it has always done. It rebuilds. Soon afterward, a new attitude toward history begins to emerge. In 1830, the Yorkshire Museum opens its doors, preserving artifacts from York's remarkable past. For perhaps the first time, the city begins treating its own history as something worthy of protection and celebration. Then comes a revolution unlike anything York has experienced before. The railway arrives. In 1839, entrepreneur George Hudson transforms York into one of Britain's most important railway hubs. New stations, workshops, hotels, and warehouses appear across the city. Thousands find employment. Businesses flourish. For centuries, York had been relatively isolated from much of the country. Now, London is only hours away. Trade accelerates. Visitors arrive in growing numbers. The city that once shaped history through conquest and power begins shaping it through connection and industry. As the Victorian era progresses, tourists flock to York's medieval streets and ancient walls. People no longer come here to fight wars or seek royal favor. They come to experience history itself. But the 20th century brings a new threat. In the early hours of April 29, 1942, air raid sirens echo across York. Residents wake in confusion. Why would German bombers target a city with little military value? The answer is chilling. York is targeted not because of what it produces, but because of what it represents. Hitler orders attacks on Britain's historic cities in an effort to damage national morale and cultural heritage. Incendiary bombs rain down upon medieval streets. Fires spread rapidly through ancient buildings. The Guildhall is destroyed. Entire sections of the city are reduced to ruins. Most frightening of all, York Minster is struck. Yet once again, ordinary people rise to the occasion. Volunteer firefighters climb onto the cathedral roof during the raid and extinguish the flames before they can spread. By dawn, much of the city is damaged. 92 people have lost their lives, but the Minster still stands. York survives once more. The decades after the war bring renewal. The University of York opens in 1963, bringing a new generation of students and scholars. The National Railway Museum celebrates the city's industrial legacy. Archaeological discoveries inspire the creation of the Jorvik Viking Center, allowing visitors to step directly into York's Viking past. Even when lightning sparks another fire in York Minster in 1984, the city repairs the damage just as it has done countless times before. For 2,000 years, York has endured invasion, plague, persecution, civil war, fire, and bombing. And through every challenge, it has found a way not merely to survive, but to reinvent itself for the next generation. For nearly 2,000 years, York has stood at the crossroads of history. It began as a Roman frontier fortress. It became an Anglo-Saxon center of faith, a thriving Viking kingdom, a medieval powerhouse, and later a city shaped by kings, merchants, reformers, and ordinary people whose stories still echo through its streets today. Few places have witnessed so much change and endured so many challenges. Empires rose and fell. Dynasties fought for power. Plague swept through the population. Fires consumed treasured buildings. Bombs fell from the sky. Yet York survived them all. Perhaps that is what makes this city so remarkable. Not its walls, its cathedral, or its ancient streets, but its resilience. Generation after generation rebuilt what was lost and carried its story forward. If you've enjoyed this journey through the complete history of York, we'd love to hear from you. Which moment in York's history surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you'd like to explore more incredible cities, lost civilizations, and forgotten chapters of history, don't forget to subscribe and join us for future journeys into the past. Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the past.